Alright everyone, it is time for yet another volume of Mushoku Tensei. And, this volume. This volume. Those of you who know, you know. But man, this volume. This is a big one in terms of the events of the story, of the series going forward. And just so much is going on in this. I thought that it was broken up into several, but it's only just the one. So, speaking of breaking up, I can that joke goes far. But speaking of breaking up, I can break this book up into three distinct parts. Part 1 is a rescue mission. Part 2 is something very special, and part 3 is kind of heartbreaking in its own way. And, well, I hope I've piqued your interest if you don't know what's happening, but it's the good stuff, so let's get into the volume. And there's no way to talk about this without spoiling a lot, so spoilers ahead for Volume 6 of Mushoku Tensei. I still suggest reading it, but this is just me going over it and talking about the book. Anyway, so let's start off with the part 1, the rescue mission. So, Rudy finally gets a clue to one of his missing family members, in this case, Lilia, his family maid / second mother. Because, she is, because Paul's kind of a piece of shit, and so she is his second wife, and so Rudy's second mother. As well as the daughter between Lilia and Paul and Aisha, Rudy's other younger sister. I think they were born the same day, so they're pseudo-twins. That's kind of funny. Okay, so as it turns out, the entire time Paul's been looking across the world for any sign of his family, his other wife, and his other daughter, they were actually held prisoner in that desert, vaguely Arabian-esque country or kingdom that Roxy was tutoring in after she left Rudy. It's not really on their way home, but Rudy obviously gets a call from Man God and decides to take a detour over there to have a little chat. Or at least have a little chat in order to find out where his family is, because, Man God gives him a vision, so he decides to just follow it. He's still highly suspicious of Man God, because Man God is very sketchy. Anyway, Rudy encounters Aisha in the middle of an alley where she's actually trying to run away from her captors. It also learns another thing. Similar to his other sister, Aisha has developed a strong dislike for her brother, but this isn't because of something Rudy did exactly. So it turns out her mother's been raising her to basically be Rudy's servant, and there are some kind of jokes about her implying that she was also raising her to potentially be Rudy's concubine, which she's his half-sister, so that's just all kinds of weird. But medieval society, so less weird? Still weird, though. Even Rudy finds it weird. Anyway, so Rudy decides to hide his identity from her because he doesn't want to make her mad, like, the last sister he encountered. So he goes off to save his other mother. That's kind of fun to say. Who was being kept in the palace by the prince who was Roxy's former student. And, well, get a load of this guy. So his basic plan was to use people that Roxy was known to have affiliations with, namely Lilia and Aisha. I cannot pronounce her name for the life of me, and I will never get it right. That he plans to use them as bait to bring Roxy in. That's a good part. That is the first part of his plan. But here is the bad part. I mean, this whole plan is bad because it's evil, but the bad part of his plan is the fact that he's trying to draw her in, but doesn't let the knowledge that the two are in his country get out. So you can see the logical flaw in his plan. So again, his plan was to use Lilia and Aisha as bait to draw Roxy in and trap her in the palace to do you-know-what to her over and over again. But because he doesn't want to be in trouble, he hid the fact they were in the country, so that's why Paul never found them. And that's also why Roxy will never show up, so your plan is automatically dead in the water. And apparently he doesn't see the flaw in his own plan. Like, Rudy looks at him and finds out the flaw immediately. This guy's like, my plan is flawless. It is hilarious how inept he is. And yet he's still the villain of this part. He's still evil little shit. Who plans to do a lot of evil shit. Anyway, Rudy, I just said it, easily figures out the flaw in his plan and is like a step away from calling him a dumbass. But outside of that comical bit, we also learn of a new concept of the world. And in Blessed Children and Cursed Children, they're basically your standard Isekai protagonist, whether they're actually Isekai or not. They're born to the world with special abilities. In this case, we meet Zenoba, who is one of the prince's brothers, aka another prince of the country. He is a blessed child who was born with abnormal super strength. So think kind of a little mini Hulk. And I really like the allegory because it's very, very keen to his personality. Anyway, little mini Hulk Zenoba has his super strength, but as a consequence, his sense of touch is kind of messed up. Like, he can't really tell a difference between people and a statue. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's true. And this leads to him having a little bit of a difficulty with another thing. Because he's also known as the head-ripping prince. You see, it goes back to when the king's true heir, because the king has had lots of children, his true heir with his true wife was born, and everyone was happy, and Zenoba was happy because, he was happy to have a little baby brother. But not being able to tell a difference between the newborn baby and a doll, he ripped off the baby's head. And that was when he was a kid and didn't know any better. And it's only gotten worse from there. It's been a recurring thing in his life that he just keeps doing this because he really is bad at this, and no one is teaching this kid like a lot of stuff because he's the prince. So they basically go on airs because he's the prince and he has the super strength. But they really should have taught this kid to stop ripping people's heads off. Like, he knows not to do it, especially later on because he does this to his fiance at one point. He kills her on their wedding night by ripping her head off. But he knows not to do it, but he still keeps doing it as a way to get his way because he knows people are super scared of him because he keeps doing this. And I find that hilarious because throughout the course of the series, Zenoba is not framed as a bad person, just someone who's not mentally or just doesn't understand because the way he was raised. And yeah, that makes sense. Also, I want to mention one major thing between the light novel and the manga. Okay, there are a lot of major things in this arc that are different between the light novel and the manga. That was the original source of which I read this story. So, in the light novel, Rudy spends most of this part of the story basically stuck in a magic draining trap he can't get out of in the castle basement in a way. Well, not in the specific castle, but in a castle basement. And basically his plan, or part of his plan, well, basically an unforeseen consequence of his plan, is him winning over Zenoba by revealing that he made the Roxy figure because Zenoba likes the figures, because he likes statues and dolls and stuff, because he can't really tell the difference. And basically talking him into joining his side, telling him that he was the one who made the figures, and then this convinces Nova to full turn on his brother and almost rip his head off. I mean, the little shit deserves it, but still. Meanwhile, Eris and Regid are basically dismantling the little prince's power because in order to maintain power amongst the nobility, there's a system where they have to have a certain number of guards, or the more guards you have, the more power you have, and the guards can quit at any time, so if they don't like you, they can just fucking leave. The reason he has all his guards is because he's basically holding their families prisoner. It's a big point because the only guard Zenoba had He traded her for the figure, but the reason she doesn't quit is because her family's being held captive by the evil prince, who I'm going to call him now because I refuse to learn this person's name. Uh, they're being held hostage by the evil prince, and so that's why she's working for him, despite the fact that she wants to dismantle him. And it's also thing because all the other guards hate him too. Yeah, he's basically blackmailing them, and Eris and Regid basically rescue their families and dismantle all of his power base because as soon as their families are safe, they can just fucking quit or go back to who their original master was before they got traded for one reason or another. It should be noted that the one guard Zenoba had, she actually liked working under Zenoba because he was kind of weird, but he was at least in her eyes, a decent person, unlike his shit heel of a brother. And that's basically what happens there. So you hear about the plan in the aftermath, and then for Rudy's part, you're just seeing him in the basement talking to Zenoba and hearing about the evil little shit's plans. And it's kind of hilarious that this is going on, and then in the background, all this super action shit should be going on, and we just don't see it. I kind of wonder if the anime gets to this point, what they'll choose, if they'll mix it up. I kind of wonder. I really hope that. Because here's what happens in the manga. We get a bit of an action sequence where Rudy fleeing the castle with Aisha and his other mother, and basically escaping with the guards secretly aiding them because they don't want to piss off the prince because he pays their salary. But they're secretly helping them because they really like the pair and they want them to escape and go back to their family. They also like them in the light novel too. In fact, the guards let Aisha escape so she could potentially deliver her letter, and they even figured out because of the chantless casting, because Roxy liked to brag about Rudy, that Rudy was there, that Rudy helped Aisha, and basically came up with their own counter plan to help Rudy out in his plan. So it wasn't really a counter plan; it was a co-plan in order to help Rudy out to save Aisha and Lila, while also getting their families rescued. So again, it all worked out, sort of like everything else the manga touches, because of coincidences and manipulations. Man, God, you're pretty sketchy. Anyway, the end result is that Rudy saves another piece of his family, and Eris starts converting Aisha over to the Church of Rudy, because Eris is all about Rudy, at least right now, and wants a potential sister-in-law that she actually likes, because she didn't really much care for the other sister. Anyway, another key difference between the manga and the light novel is Rudy keeping his identity secret from Aisha. So, in both versions, he goes by Kennel Master because of his, adventure and nickname, because he keeps Eris and Regid on leashes, in a sense, and that's what she refers to him as. But in the manga, she outright has this big reveal, or at least big revelation that the Kennel Master is Rudy, and then she has this moment where she's kind of sad. She said, "I said all these bad things about you and all this other stuff," but then they have a really cute sibling sleepover moment, and it's just a really cute moment between the pair, and it's really wholesome. But in the light novel, she keeps it a secret because she eventually does figure out that the Kennel Master is Rudy, but keeps it a secret from both Rudy and her mother because she wants to be a little mischievous, because she's kind of a little shit. Because she's not, but she's just trying to be a little mischievous because Lila has basically controlled her entire life up to this point, and so she wants to have at least one thing over her mother, which is making these cracks about her brother while also worshiping her brother. Anyway, it leads to a fun little moment in the extra story with Lila and Aisha going off to reunite with Paul. And I don't know which one I like more, because we get a cute sibling moment, but we also get a cute mother and daughter moment. And I like both because they're both cute. But, this part is a really good part. And just opposed by the next part, which is ow. So they depart because Rudy has to get Eris home, and it's too dangerous for them to go with, for Aisha really wants to go with Rudy, but it's too dangerous for her to go along, so she goes off with Lila. He also doesn't want to separate a young girl from her mother, and he wants her to have some time with Paul, and so they go off and they go on this wyvern road, this road that's famous for having a bunch of dragons or wyverns flying around it. And they're on their way home, and then they run across this odd guy with this girl in a mask who's traveling with this girl in a mask. And this guy is Orsted, the dragon god. And I didn't really go into it from the world building aspect, but anyone who is referred to as a god is the big shit. And he is a dragon god, which is the big shit of big shits. And he is alongside the mask girl, who is Nanahoshi. And just from that name, in this world there, everyone either has kind of really weird fantasy names or kind of traditional European names. A Japanese as hell name like Nanahoshi should be flaring up the red flags that something's up with this person. But Nanahoshi is important for a later part of the story. Right now, we're going to focus on Orsted. Orsted here, he's weird because he talks to Regid and Eris with familiarity. Something that puts them both off because they don't know who this person is, and all the instincts in their body are basically going full fight or flight right now just from him being nearby them. Again, they don't know who he is. They don't know he's a dragon god. They don't know why he knows them. But he knows them, and he just goes off. But he doesn't know Rudy. So he's curious about Rudy because Rudy is someone he doesn't know. And that's weird for him. And then Rudy asks him a question about the man god, and that sets Orsted off. He wipes the floor with Eris and Regid and focuses in on the fight with Rudy. Rudy manages to get one hit off on him with the stone cannon, but it's not much. He only injures him slightly, and then he uses a new form of magic Rudy has never seen before, which is basically anti-magic. And then he kills Rudy. Just runs him through the chest, kills him like he's turning him into a fucking hollow. And so Rudy's dead. End of series. Okay, no, not really. Rudy is dying. Well, he's dead, but Orsted, for some reason, changes his mind and heals him. Well, not for some reason. It's mainly thanks to Nanahoshi convincing him that, hey, maybe you should save him, because she's curious about Rudy. So this will mark a big moment for both Rudy and Eris and their relationship, because this encounter will start Rudy practicing this new form of magic. And as for Eris, well, coupled with the next part, well, I guess we should just go into it, shall we? Yeah, part 2 is pretty short, but its major implications are pretty big. I call the part 3 of this book heartbreaking, because it really is, especially for Eris, if you're an Eris fan, which I kind of am. The first part of it isn't heartbreaking, but just still kind of sad, because Regid leaves. He gets them home, well, at least outside of the settlement, that would be where their home is, and, well, yeah, he just leaves, tell them his job is done, and he has a good moment where he separates from the group and hopes that they meet again one day. And he just walks out of the series. He'll be important again later. Fans who know what's up, you know what's up. He'll be important again later. But for now, he's gone, and it's just gonna be Rudy and Eris for a bit. Which means we focus in on that relationship again. So, they travel to what remains of the city, which really is nothing. And again, it's just been reduced to a survivor's camp where people are being gathered because they have nowhere else to go. And once they get there, they meet what remains of Eris's family, or, well, Eris's staff. It's really only Ghislaine and the family butler, whose name I forget. He's literally the only person of the staff who's left who isn't either dead or left. And Ghislaine, who, same difference. Everyone else either dead or left. But what about Eris's family? Her father, mother, grandfather. They're all really important characters. Surely they're not. They're all dead. Eris's mother and father were teleported to some super dangerous zone. And even Ghislaine doesn't talk about how she found them, which signifies it was probably brutal. Even the manga doesn't really show what exactly happened, but again, it was probably brutal what happened to them. And this was a shock to Rudy because you can't even imagine it. And then the second part hits. The grandfather that Eris was so attached to, he survived the initial calamity. He survived the man disaster. But he was forced to take responsibility for the incident. And by take responsibility, they mean we're executing you as kind of a scapegoat for the public's rage. It was a complete accident that no one could predict, but he still has to take responsibility for the man disaster. And so he is beheaded and executed. And, well, Eris is left with no one. She's the sole heir to her house because her brothers are being held hostage by the upper crust of the family. So for her particular branch of the house, there's literally no one. But some asshole nobles taking the territory and is in control of it. So where does that leave Eris? What does she has left to do? Well, she's given two options, or at least her only two options. She can either, one, marry some noble asshat so she can maintain her way of life as a noblewoman, a way of life she really wasn't that attached to anyway. She had a much more fulfilling life on the road with Rudy and Regid. Or she can run off with Rudy, leave her noble title and everything else behind, and just live life an adventurer. But the obvious choice that she's obviously going to pick is going to be left aside for now because Eris needs time to settle in with the fact that everyone she loves is dead or gone. The only person she really loves that she has left are Rudy and Ghislaine. And, well, she's all out of options. Basically, the butler takes the side of the whole marry into nobility or marry further into nobility angle so that she can maintain her way of life and that they can restore the territory in order to bring it back to what it was. And Ghislaine is all about letting her live the life that she wants because that's all she cares about. She just doesn't give a fuck about the nobility, the title, the land. She just cares about Eris. And they both try to convince Rudy to go along with it because they consider, at least the butler adds him on as the last vassal of the house, which is kind of funny because he's their cousin. He was almost adopted into the family further in, too. Yeah. So they're all debating this. Rudy decides to go to sleep for the night because it's late. And then Eris decides to take her own options and bust through Rudy's door in order to fulfill the promise that they made a few volumes back before the Mon disaster. The promise to have sex. Which, to be fair to Rudy, he doesn't actually go for it at first because he wants to make sure she's in the right state of mind before he does anything like that. And hearing everything that happened, he doesn't think she's in the right state of mind, which she kind of isn't. Even she'll admit that later. But she basically goes about seducing him, and then the pair make love. And it's not like the pornographic kind of sex, it's more the intimate kind of thing. And it's a sweet moment between the two, technically teenage characters. But it's what happens after that's really heartbreaking. You see, Eris is still thinking about the loss of her family. And the only thing that she has left is Rudy. And she thinks to watching Rudy die a few days ago. She doesn't want to lose anyone else. She's clinging to Rudy because he's literally the only source of comfort she has left. And, well, she knows that he'll eventually have to be on his way. She has nothing to tie him down now outside of her body. And while she does love him, she admits that, she doesn't feel like she can stand beside him right now. There's a bit of a joke about Sakura in here, about a girl who doesn't feel like she can stand beside the person she loves. But in this case, it's more poignant. So yeah, she almost immediately regrets what she did because she also realizes, oh shit, Rudy's younger than me. A revelation that she hasn't realized since the Mon disaster, where she clung to Rudy as her only source of comfort again. So yeah, she remembers Rudy's younger than her. He eventually will have to move on with his life, and she doesn't feel like she can keep up. So, crushed by her sense of selfishness, she decides to basically do the anime thing and cut her hair leaving it a pile on Rudy's floor, and go off on a journey to make herself stronger, taking Ghislaine with her. At least in the manga, she goes off with Ghislaine. Uh, Ghislaine's not there in the light novel, so I'm just going to assume that she goes off with Ghislaine in the light novel too. Uh, but but in a kind of classic Eris move, she decides to leave Rudy one last message because she knows Rudy will probably talk her out of leaving, or at least will convince her to let him come with her, and she doesn't really want that because she knows Rudy's better at talking than her, and she doesn't really want to leave any clues for Rudy to track her down with because she wants to do this on her own. So she just leaves a message, and the message is very vague, very bad, and Rudy, being Rudy, jumps to the worst conclusion, especially considering what they just did. And so Rudy is left kind of heartbroken, kind of traumatized, and emotionally fragile because the one girl that he began to love, in his mind, dumped him after they had bad sex. Yeah, and this has left him impotent. At least this is something that'll be brought up a lot in the next volume and from there on. So, yeah, that'll be important for the next volume. But as for this one, this is probably my favorite volume of the plot so far. A lot of the story has gone by. It's a great conclusion to the story up to this point, and a good way to get Rudy off on his own, as well as continue the story and the adventure in a way. What's next in the life of Rudius Grey Rat? Well, we'll find out in Volume 7, and I'll just say thoughts on Volume 7 until we get to it. I'll just say there's a reason that it was skipped in the manga. Till then, everybody.